footnotes. These are the footnotes. Lost footsteps.
There was a boy, a very strange enchanted boy.
These are the footnotes. Lost footsteps to seek rights, taken left as hope for the Lord. Love forsaken for the taking the time for the furlong for the furlough. Future inspired to the expiration, to inspire the dissolution for the conclude. Expedited for the inverted for the ongoing halo. Hollow through the dance of the first attraction, the scene is forgotten to be a part of the statement for the announced constitute. The necessary information to be at least engaged to the addressing of the crowd for the interest of the mediocre principles in exchange for one's gratitude for the adjustments added to conclude this consideration. You're at the corner looking for the thrift, seeking the rights to taking the left, it's hope for the left, and forsaken for the taking the time to be furlong, ongoing for the principle.
A very strange enchanted boy.
These are the footnotes.
He wandered very far overland.
These are the footnotes. These are the footnotes. These are the footnotes. Lost footsteps to seek rights, taking left as hope for the Lord. Love forsaken for the taking the time for the furlong for the furlough. Future inspired to the expiration, to inspire the dissolution for the conclude. Expedited for the inverted for the ongoing halo. Hollow through the dance of the first attraction, this scene is forgotten to be a part of the statement for the announced constitute. The necessary information to be at least engaged to the addressing of the crowd for the interest of the mediocre principles in exchange for one's gratitude for the adjustments added to conclude this consideration. You're at the corner looking for the thrift, seeking the rights of taking the left with its hope for the left and forsaken for the taking the time to be furlong, ongoing for the principles in exchange for one's gratitude. Of course, you could be the destruction. You're saved. When all else fails to meet the standard to sit down for the stillness, to await the awakening for the deprivation, for the thought derived, to declare it upon the presence of life, for the depth, the darkness to be illuminated, for the shine upon the summer rise, summer for the nights, under the moon's glow, to define the directions in the nocturnal condition, to seeking the compensation for a new day with the gratitude, the coordinated and the movement for the significant other way, for the world has to been able to overlook what's been underlying of the truth and the foundation of life. No secret to the game, but it's not a sequence to find the patterns of the turmoil. Yea, do I say, God is for you. And that truth lies in the middle of the perception. The eyes have no vowels that will explain sometimes why it's so hard to comprehend who's to compromise for the empty promise of the full remorse. Can't find a way out for the peeking for the life of the shadows. It's easy to know for the look for the logic for the sweat producing the thought modified for the sleep through the amnesty and periphery of the eyes. It's so unbelievable to pray to ideologies. Parallel from you for the paradox, for the line, for the propaganda, for the proportionally pray before you pray, for the eyes that open the closed mind to the bliss inside the execution, for the needs of the peace of mind. Beneath that surface for the common ground, for unfamiliar for the bloodlines. Untied at the wrist for the lucid, resist the destitution for the anti-up. Mirror for the past and passage, you wrote the wall for the past, for the pastures, or replace the plastic garbage patches to fill the holes in the ozones. You need to be apologetic for the silences, rather authentic enough for to be talking about for the ear description, the interpretation of any relationship for the interpretation of scriptures, the living word. You find the haiku and the syllables to the feeling for the purple legion fame. Settle for the unsure to raise a hand for the first sight. First type for the righteous act, for the reactions, the right swipe, for the on the tenor topic for the troubling, the waters to strap, the life jackets, the cold chill, the fabric for the blood that warms the heart, for the ignite the emotions and utilizing the kinetic energy for the circulation to break the cycles. Patterns taught us culture paradox. Somewhere synonymous to the equinox, space and time relevance to define the truth, the numbers and not forget for the gift, for not for not for the you do not but the beauty for the various words and the being tongue tied for the lack of the words misled. Your heart to peace, the paper mache for the bloom. Not to crumble away in the wind, for the present, the current love breeds us to take flight, for the counting the number of the times it was answered and matched. Eventually it was my calling to purpose and know the purpose. Propose my proposition, propel my vision to the tunnel vision, the suicide for the high notes of the sing, the mother earth for the white noise. Easily mistaken as a missing, but the one taken apart for the replacing the reporter, for distorted for the distant waves of the gravitational pull, vibrating rating, vibes, tribes, and families. Ox to the herbs and the capacities and the capital zip codes for the ode to the soul, for the reconnected with the soil. Reincarnated with the carnation, who love that nonce for the race to the biblical. No drive for no ambition, but it's still clear for the pollution that can't wait to give a carbon emission. Electronically reconditioned for any weather condition, re-edition for the invited for the not invited for the vital times, and you don't have to watch your name for the numbers around the clock till it's 3:45. You can tell by how I keep it 1 Benjamin 100. History for the obsolete, libraries for the lie, and the silence but not the speech of the loud. Arouse those who awaken the sheep.
Ever learn is just to love and be loved.
It's because there's plenty fish and God see the shells. It's because there's plenty fish and God see the shells disappear, to disappear for the jellyfish that swim. Warm water is beautiful to sting, but you the tides bring shores all determined what the moon does. It works for or against you, the tides for the wash you, toss you back and forth until the lessons are learned, to burn, proceedings and recede. Recess and recessions are questions, no answers but emotion and confused to the giving up until it dissipate. Awakening of the sun, the light to the coral to correlate the fates to fatigue. Prenatal to premature for the nature is natural of a wonder for these flares the solar rays that sting the devil's rays. And it waits underneath the floor for the shore to await the dreamscape for that one scoping and watching the dreamers that won't come near for her. Who would know for such a noun to give be? Pro-advocates for the fatality for the surprise is so confused. It would repeat the act as though it was the first to cast the role for the spin, doing the whole play a series as the serious star for the role in Broadway. That broadcast through the piers in the Mediterranean for the meditation, the prayer for the applause. Appalled to the parent flaws to displace to vanish. Without a trace of the face to untie that lace for the maid you break. The leg for the begging, for the arriving, for the help that is on the way, for the you were already there, for the way to hand it to you like a helping hand. Distress in the beauty for the dress. Implement impressive irony to give assistance for the distance to such as you to see direction to be pleased. Acts on a date for the encompassing for the compass to be compassion. Then the complaints painful painting a picture to fate for the calamity for the calmness and confusion. Infused with the illusion to never see the conclusion for the concludes the outcome. Interlude, leaning the shoulder to lean the towers, the Eiffel to stand still, the bad postures and the dictator for the predicament for the helping of the bad intentions. Never intended for the tender heart of her eyes were blind enough for the what keep you as though you were seeing through her. Began to think for the converting the bliss to ignorance. Trance to move that emotion for the rhythm that needs to dance under the moonlight saw it was a celebratory for the pre-thought for the science and laboratory for the elaborate. You can detect for the subtle late for the fetus for the fed up and this mislead for the pen for the no ink. Thought to think that you would be ignorant for the weak eyes. Behold the beauty, with the grip to not slip the hands for the time for the heart for the wide open, that's the handle for the jar to open. The chef for the seal for the sea to see, illustrated for the sick, the illness of the illusion you could never read for that you were illiterate for the high rates of the illness and narrated. Silvering snakes to bite the trap for the charmers forsaking you for the sake and not for the idea of the intentions. Campsites and no tents. Tantalizing for the tantrums and the traumatic for the transient, for the transition to the position, the train for the blame to the deceit. Hide the indecency for the indecisive. Indecision for the indicted. Edited for the version for the indecent. Complacency to complain simply being sampled to the ample, the amp, the camp to compromise and no pleasure for the plea. What's the outstep for the insect, for the infect, for the infiltrate. Filling the rate for the tyrant. Anticipating for the pain of the path to the back, for the payback, for the pay for it. Previous mistakes and staked out the place of all along waiting the scales to measure the fate. Which world you carry dice for the bloody dance, for the romance of the movie, for the move that to the come to the forward, the come outcome for the can take. Take two for the three, for the cut and the action. Contender for the complete. Contemplation for the agenda, regardless of the gender for the congendment, for the hardest way for the gent, sadicity deserving desserts. Dry desert, dry desert for the look of descent. Delivered for the depleted, for the diplomats, for the hats and the hate, for the air, for the diplomacy, for the idiots and no idea for the who they became, for the memory and have no idea for another idea. Idiopathic, ideology. The idiots that don't see the cause and effect for the effective, for the dreamers to wait for seeing the forethought. Go forgetting but about the loss in the moment for the memory, for the morons, the more, the moon, the lunatics, for the keep the lunatics and watching, for the redundancy, for the act, for the instead of the action of invasion. Unveil the mask and tape over the eyes to blame yourself instead of the misleading that pleads to innocence. Outcome of ignorance, you rant, she irate. Rational to irrational for the given the rational ratio for the relevant. Venting for vengeance for taking on to the moon for the two faces, but you can only see one. One that looks like a smiling man on the surface for the craters, for impacted for the crates of occurrence of the current drowning. Treading emotions of which can't see but the seas. You the shiny sea for the seals. Sealing the secrets of the seductive sacrament. Like a capital for the golden state, for the mind, for the treasures, and the one-eyed pirates to kill the math, for the secret, for the enriching the currencies to loom curriculum, circulating like an orbit of the dumb, making the painful emotions numb enough for the not adding up like the letters to the numbers. Times has been on the table for the ship in multiplication, for the some power, for the precise perceptions. Prescribe to some scriptures to be legit, or litigate for the literature, for the litter, for the trash talk like a wasted pleasure. Will please such a question for the nutrients, the better diet, or deity for the decency, for the pawn you. Choice of a moon for the sun, like a Sabbath for the mandate, for the beginnings of a beggars, for the weak, for the hunger pain, for no food for thought, for the eating a plant, for the garden, the plant-based deprivation upon your growling growth, growing pains that ache the heart to beat itself to death, like a civil rights case in the case of instead, stealing for their own integrity, for the catcher pleading for the blood, for the savers, and accountability for the blood banks and credit for the fraud.
God is resourceful, gives us all the resources we need for rich in spirituality, for the morality, for the unity, for the thrive, sustain integrity, for the longevity, for the earth as in heaven. We are no difference with the you are the don't, hype the hypocrisy, for the considering the common conditions and the control. Confessions and conflict, we conceive for the complex, the way that life is decided, rather than done, the most important for the animals in the garden of space. Energy for the spirit, for the seeking the harmony, through the love and intentions, and innovative for the inventive. Christian for the sun, for the anointing, for the crosses, appointed for the honor, for the merit. Purity to depart for the blind seas and transatlantic for the Atlantis. The removing of Africa for the God. Within our sacred body for the indigenous and the origins, to be virgins and not Virgo, for the vigorous, for the vigilantes, for the vigilantism. Imperialism for the common, communism for the segregation of the communities, the commencing of unity for the divine intentions, not to hurt self or others for love. The self and most high for the creator, for the source, the sun, light will sustain. Self, you, the seed, the deer for the side, for the source behind the forehead and forefathers and who passed an empire of the generation to be lost or founded. Rather found for the dead seeking this life. John Jackson, the man of prophecy, to stand before the proposed propaganda for the agendas and the system of the stems. Cells of the mind for the institutional life and the criminal. Fate for the fair to the rares of the rest. The transgressions to grieve for the aggressively acts. The course to courtship for the converter for the corrupt disruption, the distractions. Attract the lack of focus and hocus and spells to prevent the liberation for the independence and the free and the meaning for the exploitation of the nation. The regions of religion for the realignment for the meaning of the applies to application to the light. The righteousness in the humankind, the questionable, the current events. Currency, the dependence upon the substance of the ignorance and the oxymorotic for the exposure for the martyrs to the evolving, the daughters, the concepts revealing to the revolution for the constitution, what you are for the intuitive for the power for the numbers. One is lesser than the intuitive additives than the subtracted attractions of ignorance and offer benevolence over violence. Lie or stand up or lie down with this, and this is the land of ours, and have no rights but righteous and conductive of whom we are all the developing for the contractions we are all completion of the circle for the siphon circumference. Without fences there's not a need for the defense. Senses is a sensing in unison. Undivided of attention attracting attributes of retribution and rebuttals. God is resourceful.
God is resourceful. God is resourceful. Gives us all the resources we need for rich and spirituality, for the morality, for the unity, for the thrive. Sustain integrity, for the longevity, for the earth as in heaven. We are no difference whether you are than don't. Hype the hypocrisy, for the considering the common conditions and the control. Confessions and conflict. We conceive for the complex the way that life is decidedly. Rather than done, the most important for the animals in the garden of space. Energy for the spirit, for the seeking the harmony, for the love and intentions, and innovative for the inventive. Christian for the sun, for the anointing, for the crosses, appointed for the honor, for the merit. Purity to depart for the blind seas and transatlantic for the Atlantis. The removing of Africa for the God. Within our sacred body for the indigenous and the origin to be virgins and not Virgo for the vigorous or the vigilantes or the vigilism. Imperialism for the common. Communism for the segregation of the communities, the commencing of unity for the divine intentions, not to hurt self or others for love. Yourself and most high for the creator, for the source, the sun, light will sustain. Self, you, the seed, the deer for the side, for the source behind the forehead and forefathers and who passed an empire of the generation to be lost or founded. Rather found for the dead seeking this life. John Jackson, the man of prophecy, to stand before the proposed propaganda for the agendas and the system of the stems. Cells of the mind for the institutional life and the criminal. Fate for the fair to the rares of the rest. The transgressions to grieve for the aggressively acts. The course to courtship for the converter for the corrupt disruption and distractions. Attract the lack of focus and hocus and spells to prevent the liberation for the independence and the free and the meaning for the exploitation of the nation. Regions of religion for the realignment for the meaning of the applies to application to the light. Righteousness in the humankind, the questionable, the current events. Currency, the dependence upon the substance of the ignorance and oxymorotic for the exposure for the martyrs to the evolving, the daughters, the concepts revealing to the revolution for the constitution, what you are for the intuitive, for the power for the numbers. One is lesser than the intuitive additives than the subtracted attractions of ignorance and offer benevolence over violence. Lie or stand up or lie down with this, and this is the land of ours, and have no rights but righteous and conductive of whom we are all the developing for the contractions we are all completion of the circle for the siphon circumference. Without fences there's not a need for the defense. Senses is a sensing in unison. Undivided of attention attracting attributes of retribution and rebuttals. These are the footnotes. Lost footsteps to seek rights, taken left as hope for the love. Love forsaken for the taking the time for the furlong for the furlough. Future inspired to the expiration to desire the dissolution for the conclude. Expedited for the inverted for the ongoing halo. Hollow through the dense of the first attraction, the scene is forgotten to be a part of the statement for the announced constitutes. The necessary information to be at least engaged to the addressing of the crowd for the interest of the mediocre principles in exchange for one's gratitude for the adjustments added to conclude this consideration. You're at the corner looking for the thrift, seeking the rights of taking the left with its hope for the left and forsaken for the taking the time to be furlong. Ongoing for the principles in exchange for one's gratitude, of course, you could be the destruction. You're saved. When in all else fails to meet the standards to sit down for the stillness to await the awakening for the deprivation for the thought derived to declared upon the presence of life for the depth, the darkness to be illuminated for the shine upon the summerized summer for the nights under the moon's glow to define the directions of the nocturnal condition, to seeking the compensation for a new day with the gratitude, the coordinated and the movement for the significant other way for the world has to been able to overlook what's been underlying of the truth and the foundation of life. No sequence to the game, but it's not a sequence to define the patterns of the turmoil. Yea, do I say, God is for you. And that truth lies in the middle of the perception. The eyes have no vowels that will explain sometimes why it's so hard to comprehend who's to compromise for the empty promise of the full remorse. Can't find a way out for the picking for the life of the shadows. It's easy to know for the look for the logic for the sweat producing the thought modified for the sleep through the amnesty and periphery of the eyes. It's so unbelievable to pray to ideologies. Parallel from you for the paradox, for the line, for the propaganda, for the proportionally pray before you pray for the eyes that open and closed mind to the bliss inside the execution for the means to the peace of mind. Beneath that surface for the common ground, for unfamiliar for the bloodlines. Untied at the wrist for the loosely resisted destitution for the anti-up. Mirror for the past and the past you at the wall for the past for the pastures are replaced with plastic garbage patches to fill the holes in the ozones. You need to be apologetic for the silences, rather authentically enough for the be talking about for the ear description, the interpretation for the relationship for the interpretation of the scriptures, the living word. You find the haiku and the syllables to the feeling for the purple legion vein. Settle for the unsure to raise a hand for the first sight. First type for the righteous acts, for the reactions, the right swipe for the on the tenor topic for the troubling of waters to strap this life jackets, the cold chill, the fat for the blood that warms the heart for the ignite the emotions and utilizing the kinetic energy for the circulation to break the cycles. Patterns taught us culture, paradox. Somewhere synonymous to the equinox, space and time, relevance to define the truth, the numbers and not forget for the gift, for not for they do not but the do for the curves words of the being tongue tied for the lack of the words misled. Your heart to piece, the paper mache for the bloom, not to crumble away in the wind for the present, the current love breezes to take flight for the counting the number of the times it was answered and matched eventually.